Alright guys, today we're going to be doing a very quick comparison to find out, which might be the more suitable foldable for you. On one hand, we do have the Honor Magic V5, and on the other hand, we have the Z Fold 7. Now today's video is not going to be bashing either one of the brands. They are both great foldables. The competition is so close now, but we still want to find out which is the more suitable device for you. So anyway, I've got a couple of points down here, so I might be looking at my computer every once in a while, but let's begin and find out the differences here. All right, so first things first, let's start off with the main elephant in the room. Let's talk about the weight, the design, and the thickness levels. Okay, so my honest opinion here is that they're both very slim. They're both about the same weight. When I just hold them side by side, you can't really tell like, is this really lighter than the other? At the end of the day, it's plus minus a couple of grams or a couple of 0 point something millimeters. In terms of the shape, however, I think that's actually a bigger difference that you might want to take note of. So on the Honor Magic V5, this is actually going for a more curvy design. So all around, it's slightly more curvy, whereas on the Samsung device, it's a more edgy kind of device. Again, it's really down to your personal preference. In terms of ergonomics, I think the Honor actually does a better job here because of that rounded edges at the side. Whenever you're just holding a phone, it doesn't really poke into your palm. However, for the Samsung device, yes, it looks really good, because it has all these flat edges, flat sides and all that, but it kind of pokes into your palm when you're just holding it like this. And it's actually, you might find it a bit hurting after long periods of time. But either ways, this is really down to your personal preference. If you ask me, I actually prefer the ergonomics of the Honor device here. All right. Let's move on. In terms of the second point here, the displays. How are the displays different? Okay, let's put it simply. In terms of the displays, obviously we have one display on the outside, one on the inside. Just in terms of size, I would say that the Samsung's display size is ever so slightly larger than the Honor device. If you're just looking at one single device, you won't really be able to tell, but if you put them side by side, you might notice, yes, the Samsung is slightly ever larger than that of the Honor device. However, when it comes to brightness levels, this is where the Honor device comes in because it goes even higher, all the way up to 5000 nits, whereas it doesn't get that high on the Samsung device. So larger display goes to the Samsung device, brighter display goes to the Honor. Okay, let's move down and see what else we have here in our points. Now, moving on, we want to talk a little bit about the chipset. Okay, so they're both running the Snapdragon 8 Elite. Now, in terms of power, you can expect both to be the same. However, I did actually run a couple of benchmark tests. In fact, quite a fair bit of benchmark tests. What I noticed here is that just in terms of the benchmark scores, what I did was the Wildlife Extreme test. The Honor device actually constantly managed to get higher scores. Now, in terms of the score consistency, I would say that they're both quite similar in that sense because they do fluctuate a little bit. Moving on, in terms of the frame rate achievable. Now again, the stronger one actually goes to the Honor device because it could constantly get higher frame rates compared to Samsung's. Now moving on, in terms of the temperatures, you can see that again, Honor is actually able to pull up higher temperatures. And I think that's also how it was able to achieve higher scores and higher frame rates. So there's no throttling going on with the Honor device, but I believe Samsung might be throttling it so that it doesn't get too warm, and hence the result is not as high as that of the Honor device. So at the end of the day, if you just want maximum performance, you're going to get a bit more out of the Honor. But just on the day-to-day, they're both using the Snapdragon 8 Elite, so they are both equally strong. All right, moving on, let's talk a bit about the battery. Now, this is something that a lot of people have been talking about. So on paper, the Honor device has a larger battery compared to the Samsung device. In terms of real-world use, I did a couple of tests here, such as watching videos, playing games, and actually for each individual test, you might notice a difference of 3 to 4%. Sometimes even longer periods, you get 5 to 6% difference. But you might think those are small numbers, but at the end of the day, you notice that the Honor device actually come up with higher battery compared to the Samsung device. Now, I know the battery has been benchmarked in some tests that we have seen online. However, after some real-world use, the experience is really different. I wouldn't say that the Samsung device is having a bad battery. It has a decent battery life actually. But if you just want to have more juice at the end of the day, that's clearly going to the Honor Magic V5. Okay, now let's talk a bit about charging. Now, charging is a very different story here because the Honor charges up way quicker. So if you just want to charge up your phone very quickly, I did a test from 30% onwards because I don't really let my phone die all the way to 0%. From 30% onwards all the way to 100%, the Honor device actually takes 38 minutes. Now moving over to Samsung, from 30 all the way to 100, it actually took 69 minutes. So that's about 30 minutes more to charge the Z Fold 7 up to 100% compared to the Honor device. Now, I do hope that Samsung actually bumps up their charging game in the future so that it gets a bit quicker, because to be honest, slightly more than an hour from 30 to 100 is quite a long time. Now, moving on, another really important difference between the two is actually in terms of their UI. Naturally, we have Magic OS on here, and we also have One UI on this guy. So I've already done individual videos for each device here where you can check it out, how they work, how they multitask. Everything is very different. I would say that this is really down to your personal preference. Some people who has been using Honor device for so long, definitely they will say Magic OS is better. And of course there are those in that camp who has used Samsung devices for so long, and definitely they would say that One UI is better. So I do suggest you go and check out those videos to find out which is actually your favorite. In terms of software support, the Honor Magic V5 comes with 4 years of major OS updates, 5 years of security, and Samsung is offering 7 major upgrades for their Z Fold 7. So naturally, you can see that Samsung is actually able to give you updates for a longer period of time. Now moving on, let's talk a bit about the cameras. What's really different here is in terms of the way they process the photos. Today, we will not talk about the megapixel count because we all know that megapixel count doesn't really translate to real-world experiences. Now, just in terms of real-world photos, I would say that the Samsung device takes photos that are a bit more natural, so they are good for you if you want to edit them later. Now, the Honor device, on the other hand, actually edits the photo. I would say there's some processing going on, and so that your photos are actually ready to share directly on social media. Now, which camp are you in? Are you the kind of person who prefers natural photos so you can edit them later? Or are you the kind of person who prefers photos that have been edited so that you can actually share them directly? Again, there's a lot of people with different preferences. So if it were you, let me know which is your own personal favorite. Alright guys, finally, the main differentiating factor between the two, and also the main reason why you might choose one over the other, actually boils down to price. How are you able to afford either one of these devices? Now, the Honor device comes in at RM6999, whereas the Samsung device comes in at RM8399. Already, there's a 1,400 ringgit difference in between the two for a similar spec device. Furthermore, Honor is actually giving you 1 year of accidental protection and 2 years of defects coverage for the internal and external displays. For this kind of service, you actually have to add another 800-900 ringgit for the Samsung Z Fold 7. So I think this is again a very big difference here. If you add in those warranty services and all that, the differences might be about 2,000 ringgit or even more. Now, which one would you actually purchase? I would say that if you really value, getting the best bang for your buck, getting all those good specifications, a lightweight device, fairly slim, you got everything that you need, then you should definitely go for the Honor Magic V5. However, if you're someone who is stuck to One UI, like the way the camera works, you want that 7 years of software support, then I would say that go for the Samsung Z Fold 7. Anyways, let me know which one you might choose, Honor or Samsung. Let me know down in the comment section below. Let you guys be the judge of who is the winner here. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.